Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I'm reviewing a pen from Asvine. I've reviewed a number of Asvine pens over the last couple of years and I've found them to be really great, and this is absolutely no exception. This is a really interesting pen. It's not a particularly fancy pen, but it is interesting and I think it's got a lot going for it. So let's have a look at it. It's a P30 fountain pen. And the P30 is a piston filling pen, hence the P at the start of the name. It comes in its usual Asvine box, and here it is. What makes this pen interesting is this sort of aged brass or antique brass finish on it with the clear acrylic body. So I'm going to talk about the parts and features. I'll do a writing sample and talk about some pros and cons. So I've been using this pen now for the last few weeks, and incidentally, tomorrow I'll be posting a video where I outline some of my review process, and I use this pen as the guinea pig, if you will. So keep an eye out for that one. But yes, it's a super interesting pen that I've really loved using. Starting at the top of the pen, you see it's got this sort of domed cap, and it's that aged brass material for the entire cap. The clip is on a band that is sort of cut in there, and I find the clip to be very springy. It's perfectly usable, but it is on the springy sort of side. It is soft, and that's it does the job though. The cap swells to this sort of mock center band that has Asvine there and then P30 on the back. There is a little step down onto the clear acrylic body, which is beautifully clear. You can see the ink sort of moving around in there. That continues along and tapers ever so slightly. Then we get this bullet shaped coned end once again in the aged brass material. You can see some of the mechanism of the piston is also in that same material. These pistons are all really easily manageable, and you can sort of take them apart using the tools and all that kind of stuff to give it a good proper clean. The cap unscrews in 1 3/4 turns and reveals a aged brass section. There's a tiny step down onto some relatively smooth threads, you don't notice them. Nice size section which tapers, and then we get a number 6 steel Asvine nib. And I have this one in the medium. This is a really attractive profile on this pen. I like the lines of it, I like the general design, and I love the balance in the hand. And one of the things I really do love is the fact that firstly, it's a piston filler, which I'll come back to in just a second, but also I really like this aged brass sort of material. Basically, the brass underneath has been aged and then coated with I suppose it's an enamel coating or something to protect it, and it stops it patinaing further and all that kind of stuff. It looks fantastic. There's a lot of brands who do aged brass pens and things, but I think what Asvine have done here really well is partnering it with the clear acrylic. They've given us a pen that is both a good solid weight, but not super heavy, and perfectly balanced in the hand. As I said, it is a piston mechanism, and it is that standard piston mechanism that we see from a range of Chinese pen brands. So Asvine is a Chinese pen brand, and some of these brands get parts manufactured by other companies, or they all use the same company. And this piston mechanism, it's very similar to the ones on pens, say, by Moonman. But as I said, super easy to take apart and super easy to clean. I won't show the filling mechanism in action with this pen, but I have a TWSBI Eco here where I can show it. It's the same, more or less the same kind of filling system mechanism in there. And basically what you do is you submerge the nib into a bottle of ink, you twist the piston knob, and as you can see when you do that, a piston runs up and down inside the pen. And as you pull that piston back up, it will draw ink up into the pen. There's lots of videos on how to get an even fuller fill, all that kind of stuff, but that is your basics. Couple of other details before we do size comparison. There is a plastic liner on the inside of this cap. Now that features two things. Firstly, it means we get a really good seal on the pen. There's no issues of drying out or anything like that. It also means that the threads are all very smooth. Now, I'm not sure what kind of plastic this is. A lot of pens from sort of higher end brands such as 5040 and Gravitas and things like that are using a Delrin cap liner, but this one I'm not sure what this is. So depending on how the quality of that plastic, you've got plastic there on sort of metal threads. So over time, we just want to keep an eye on those threads so that they don't get sort of eaten up too much. The other thing is that while the pen does post, it posts onto the piston knob, which is not my favorite feature. A couple of things. Firstly, that makes it a relatively long pen, as well as quite a back heavy pen. But also, if you happen to bump that posted on there, you can activate the piston mechanism, and that is the absolute last thing we want to do, because that will result in an inky mess. But that is the basics of the pen. Let's now do a size comparison. Okay, for the size comparison today, I've got it alongside another Asvine pen. I've got it here alongside the Asvine P30, another piston filling pen of theirs. This has got titanium finish. You can see that it shares some similarities in terms of the shape, if not the size. I've got it here alongside a Lamy Safari, and then I've got it alongside a Pilot Custom 823. Now, this is obviously an extreme end of the spectrum, and I could have put this alongside the V126 from Asvine, but there are so many videos that do that. But the 823 here from Pilot, once again, shares some basic sort of length and girth and things like that. So if this is a size pen you're interested in, but you want something with a little bit more bulk, something like the Asvine P30 might be a nice option. But you can see capped, they all sort of come in at a similar kind of length, all just slightly longer there than the standard Lamy Safari. Uncapped, still not dissimilar in length, the Pilot being slightly longer and the P30 being slightly longer than the P36, all being slightly longer there than the Lamy Safari. And once again, when they're all posted, it's a similar kind of thing. As I said, I don't suggest you post the Asvine P30. It posts onto that piston knob, and that for me is just a disaster waiting to happen. But you can see the length here if you decide to. Okay, let's talk about the specific dimensions now of the Asvine P30. It's 149 millimeters when it's capped, so it's a nice length. It's 131 when it is uncapped, and that's okay. It's a good size in the hand. I find this pen very comfortable and very easy to use. Posted, yes, it does post at 177, so it's long-ish. Back weighted, yes, definitely, but also, as I said, posts onto the piston knob. The section goes from about 10 to 11 millimeters, and it's about 15 millimeters around the cap. So it's got a nice girth to it. The pen weighs 48 grams, 28 in the body and 20 in the cap. So when you do post it, you are also putting quite a lot of weight on the back there. So you do feel the pen slightly back weighted in your hand. It is a piston filling pen, and in my early tests, the sort of vague capacity I could sort of get into it relatively easily was about 1.5 milliliters of ink. So that's more than enough for quite a lot of writing, even with this very generous medium nib. Okay, before I do a writing sample, let's talk about the price. Now, as I said, this pen was sent to me by Asvine, and through places like Amazon and eBay and AliExpress, the range of the cost of the pen does differ a little bit. I'll include a link down into the video description here, but generally speaking, it is about 42 to 55 Australian dollars for this pen, which is very reasonable given it's a good piston filling pen. It's got a nice sturdy build quality, a very nice nib as you're about to see, and a good sort of size pen in the hand. Asvine and a couple of brands like Hongdian are doing really high quality pens that are showing the world that Chinese pens are not what they used to be, and that they can play very, very competitively alongside their more, other international competitors. Okay, so time for our writing sample today. Got Clairefontaine 90 GSM paper here. This is the Asvine P30. I'll just say this is the aged brass, and it has a number 6 steel medium nib. The ink in this today is the beautiful Diamine I've written that wrong. Kensington Blue. This is a really lovely ink. It shades really well in this pen. It's a fairly wet writer, which allows for a lot of that nice shading to come through. The first ink I had in this was Diamine Monbotto's Hat, which is a great ink, don't get me wrong, but it's so saturated that in a wet pen like this, it was really, really wet. Let's do some writing. So you can see it writes nicely, it writes consistently, it's got, you know, a good flow, and it's a nice medium line. I'd say it sort of sits right on that. It's a slightly finer medium than, say, some of the Yovo mediums. It sits nicely at that sort of Asian end of medium as opposed to the German or European size. As I said, wetness for this pen is really solid. Reverse writing. It's a bit scratchy, it's very dry, it's not its strength. You can get a tiny little bit of sort of line variation out of this pen, but it's not what it's designed for. But if you're careful, you can, and actually that allows for some really lovely shading there. Let's do some fast writing. Well, it seems by the end of that it was starting to hit a couple of like little, you know, hard starts or skips. But for the most part, it's writing really, really well. As I said, smooth writer. In everyday writing, this pen holds up really, really well. I've done a lot of writing with this pen, and I've never had an issue with ink starvation or hard starts or anything like that. Yeah, it just performs really, really well. So what are the pros and cons of the Asvine P30? The only actual con I have for this pen, personally, is that it posts onto the piston knob. I don't like that. I wouldn't need to post this pen anyway myself, but if you're someone who does like to post their pens and prefers to, just be aware of that. The other thing that will be an issue for some people may be the weight. It's not a lightweight pen, and let's be honest, this aged brass look isn't going to be for everyone. Personally, it is exactly what I like. I love this. So there are lots of pros with this pen for me. Firstly, it's got a beautiful nib. Generally speaking, it's wet, it's smooth, it's reliable. I've had no issues with it. I love the feel of this piston mechanism. It's very smooth. It works very, very nicely. It's got great threads. That plastic liner, it makes a very smooth threading system. How long that will hold up? Well, as I said, I've only been using this pen for a few weeks, but it's held up beautifully in that time. I think the balance of the pen is really, really nice in the hand, particularly unposted. There's a bit of weight up here in the end, there's a bit of weight down here in the section, and that keeps it nice and balanced because it puts the weight into your fingers, nothing back, nothing too forward. It's very comfortable. It kind of disappears into your hand in that way. I found this to be a very reliable pen. You know, it's been one that I've carried quite a lot. I've used it at work, I've used it at rehearsal. It's worked for me, and I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, I think you get a lot of bang for your buck with this pen. The price is good at 42 to 55 roughly Australian, depending on where you get it and when. I think it's good value. I think it writes well. I think it's an interesting pen, and I think Asvine are doing great things. So I hope you found this video about the Asvine P30 to be interesting and useful. Please like and subscribe, hit the notifications button, all that kind of stuff. It all helps the algorithm and helps me to continue to make videos for you. A big thank you to Asvine for providing this pen and others for review. Their support of my channel is really appreciated, and I hope you enjoy seeing their pens. I certainly love showing them to you. I think they're great. So in the meantime, enjoy your pens, enjoy writing, and I'll talk to you soon.